things. Not all provincial merchants are idiots. By your own logic, you're a hack without the talent to make it in the capital. And it certainly doesn't seem like you've risen to the top here. Ha ha. Ali was a force to be reckoned with, and not the type they could fight. The whole party was starting to feel tired. And the next day, "Let's do our best out there today." "Yeah," came 4 voices in unison. "Why do we have an extra person?" "Yes." 4 voices had responded to Raina's rallying cry. That was one too many. What is this, the entrance exam for Galactic University? As usual, Mile was thinking her weird thoughts. Now that it's come to this, we have no choice but to expose the interloper in our. It's obviously Ali. Raina cut in coldly. Mile was devastated to have been robbed of her game of deduction. "We're about to go do our hunter work," Raina began. "Why is a merchant like you tagging along? Even if you were a hunter, there would be no reason for you to join us." "She's right," Pauline chimed in after Raina, her mood decidedly foul. "Plus, now that I think about it, you're a merchant and a money grubber. That's stealing my whole gimmick. Are you out to jeopardize my position?" Oh, she didn't notice the overlap until now. The other members of the Crimson Vow thought, and she admits she's a money grubber. What's more, Raina was also a self-styled merchant. If there were 3 merchants among 5 girls, their personas would start to blend together. Thanks to her strong personality, Raina didn't seem too concerned about this prospect, but Pauline, who considered herself plain and unremarkable, considered it a huge dilemma. Of course, as their resident big-boobed, black-hearted money grubber, Pauline's party considered her a strong personality in her own right. "Well, I guess it's not a problem for us if you come along. We've already advertised our storage magic to the rest of the Hunters Guild, and the only reason we were ranked so low before was because we were new registrants. We hunt orcs and ogres every time we go out, so everyone knows we have the skills of an upper C rank to a B rank. In fact, we are C ranks now. If there's a problem here, it's whether you can brave the danger of the hunting grounds we like to frequent." Mile claimed Ali's presence wouldn't be a problem, however, the other members of the party weren't so sure. It was a bad idea to let an outsider discover the true nature of Pauline's hot magic, or rather, that it was possible to extract the pungent component known as capsaicin and use it for spells. Information like that was the trifecta of profitable, reproducible, and attractive to money grubbers. But this had not occurred to Mile. Huh? Fortunately, Ali had her own concerns upon hearing Mile's description of the party's hunting grounds. Ali, who had apparently started out as a farmer's daughter and worked her way up to merchant, obviously had no experience fighting monsters. There was no question that even a goblin or a kobold could take her out in a heartbeat. And the hunting grounds where the newly C-ranked Crimson Vow were headed was not the kind of newbie-friendly area where only slimes, goblins, or kobolds would appear. It definitely wasn't a safe place to bring an ordinary girl who wasn't even a hunter. Oh, on second thought, a merchant's job is to buy and sell game and materials. Interfering with the work of those in another industry would be wrong of me, Ali babbled, back in the peppy mode she supposedly adopted to act like a proper merchant. "I'll be here eagerly awaiting your return." "What are we gonna do about her?" Raina grumbled as the group headed for the forest. "I'm not sure how to answer that," said Mavis, her expression equally pained. "If we don't want to cause problems for the guild and its hunters, we can't break our promise to the guild master. Which means we also can't exploit a loophole in the agreement by selling to the merchants guild or a small business. Even if we decided to do something like that, we'd just sell our stock directly. There'd be no reason to make her the middleman and give her a cut of the profits, right?" "Yes, precisely. We already have a business manager, me." Pauline seemed unwilling to back down on that point. "Besides, she's just a small-time merchant who came to us hoping to take advantage of Mile's storage. What do you think will happen if we take pity on her and let her exploit us like that? All the small-time and greenhorn merchants in town will flock to us." Mile sighed. "No, worse," Pauline shot back. All the merchants and regular old money grubbers will come swarming in. Why shouldn't they? We'd be as good as a magic mallet that spits out super profitable materials with a little pestering. If we don't want to get dragged into trouble, we shouldn't supply goods to anyone but the Hunters Guild, irrespective of any promises we've made. We should also avoid direct dealings with the Merchants Guild. I'm sure they've settled on a division of duties with the Hunters Guild, and they can't resist the pressure from the more influential merchants. The Merchants Guild doesn't enjoy the same freedom as the Hunters Guild. Whoa. Miles' eyes widened, but she seemed to buy Pauline's explanation. So you're saying we should totally ice Arlie out and refuse to give her the time of day? I'd feel kind of bad about that. Didn't she come to us after picking up on something that none of the other merchants did, convinced that her livelihood hung in the balance? I feel like we should honor her powers of investigation with at least an Outstanding Effort Award or a Passionate Performance Award, if not a Zojirushi Award. As usual, I have no idea what you're talking about, said Raina, exasperated. Though at least this time she could understand most of it, apart from the mysterious Zojirushi Award. It doesn't seem like any of the other merchants have caught on to us yet, so what if we helped her make some coin just this once before cutting her off? Mile proposed. You're too much of a pushover. Whatever our intentions, no merchant would let a perfectly good moneymaker go without a fight. She'd follow us around for the rest of our lives. That was a pretty convincing argument coming from Pauline. This is a problem, said Raina. Quite a dilemma, said Mavis. A real pickle, agreed Mile and Pauline. Were the average hunter to be plagued by someone who sniffed out their secrets, followed them around, and hounded them relentlessly, they would speedily dispose of their stalker in a discreet and efficient manner. Obviously, the Crimson Vow had no intention of doing that. And so, I stand by my earlier idea. Why don't we give her a one-time wholesale of something valuable as a special gift, then say, this is the first and last time. If you don't like that, we'll cancel the sale and cut you off now? And we make it clear that we won't be taking requests from anyone else after that, either, Miles suggested. Maybe it's not the worst idea. We don't have any real obligation to do it, but I know you have a policy of rewarding hard workers. Sure, I'm fine with that. If we run into trouble afterwards, we can always just leave this town for the capital. I have no objections. If everyone else agrees, I don't mind. Raina, Mavis, and Pauline were all on board with Miles' plan. What if we sold her one of the rare, high-level monsters in Miles' storage? Mavis proposed. That wouldn't affect the market price of the other monsters, and it would probably bring in enough profit for her to rent a small storefront. Maybe then she'd be satisfied and concentrate on running her shop. No way, Raina argued. She'd demand that we fork over more of those high-profit monsters and latch onto us harder than ever. Plus, the other merchants would come swarming as soon as they heard about it. We need to make it something she'll know is a one-time thing. Worse, if people find out we've killed such high-level monsters before, they'll get on our case about where and when we hunted them. The Crown will send an investigation team to look into it, and the whole thing will turn into a big to-do. Since a lone monster can't just appear out of thin air, they'll assume there are at least a few dozen packs living in the area. As a natural consequence, it will become public knowledge that we killed them, and that we did it as a party of 4 young girls with no backers aside from the Hunters Guild. And when that happens... Oh man. Raina didn't have to finish that sentence. Plus, Pauline added, if the regional or royal army is sent in, the local population is agitated, and the operations of hunters in the area are restricted, all to deal with the threat of some high-level monsters that don't even exist, will be disrupting the lives of an inordinate number of people. If it comes out later that we were lying, we'll have to pay exorbitant damages, and will be taken into the custody of either the Crown or the local lord and put to work however they see fit. Good point. Though at least it would serve the kingdom much better to keep our handy 4-man cell as compliant combat slaves than to send us to the mines, Miles said with her usual optimism. All 4 of them agreed on this before losing themselves in thought for a time. Oh, I know. How about a sea serpent? Miles suggested. That way, no one would ask where we hunted it or if there are schools of them around. And since the materials don't appear on the market, we wouldn't have to worry about a price collapse. No matter how many of them we hunt or how the price fluctuates, no one else would be inconvenienced. And if she wants more, we can tell her to go hunt one herself, 'cause we refuse to brave that danger again. Great idea. The other members of the party concurred. Sure enough, no hunter alive would brave the open sea in a tiny fishing boat just to hunt sea serpents, so the only time the materials were ever in stock was when a dead one happened to wash up on the beach, and by that point, most of its flesh and skin would have rotted or been eaten by marine life, leaving its bones and teeth as the only usable resources. Even that only happened once every few years or so. Sea serpent materials were exceedingly rare. Everyone knew where to go to hunt the creatures. Yet it was far too dangerous a hunting ground, and far too dangerous a prey, to tell a hunter to go back there and slay some more. I like it. The only question is, how do we get out to sea? Asked Raina. The other three froze. Sure, they had slain a bunch of sea serpents with ease one time, but that was because they had Kraken for transportation and the ship as a platform to fight on. They didn't need Kraken, but they did need a ship. Mile could fly if she had to, but that still left the other three, the fight, and the retrieval of their catch to worry about. It was hard to imagine any fisherman lending his boat for such a risky venture. A boat was a fisherman's fortune. It was perhaps as valuable as a house in a prime urban location would be to a modern Japanese person. A fisherman's boat was his very soul. A precious asset to pass on to his son when he took over the business. Who would take that out to sea to indulge the nonsense of some little girls from out of town who wanted to hunt sea serpents? Only a fool would agree to something like that. All right, I'm in. How stupid are you? By some miracle, an old fisherman had taken them up on their reckless proposal. He was about 60 years old, give or take. I've lived a long life. I was already thinking of taking my partner out for a voyage instead of withering away and burdening my loved ones. My son just built himself a new ship, so he gave me back my old faithful. It's no loss to anyone if a battered old geezer and a battered old boat go down together. And to do it alongside 4 pretty ladies is a luxury not even the highest of nobles could afford. I'll ascend straight to heaven, no doubt about that. 60 was pretty old in this world. Appendicitis and pneumonia killed people all the time, and more died in childbirth than in war, both babies and mothers. Plus, poor nutrition meant that people aged quickly. A fisherman's skin was especially prone to cracking and wrinkling from decades of exposure to the tides and sun. Anyone who could live to this man's age and leave behind children and grandchildren would have no regrets. Indeed, it could even be joyful to escape the ugliness of old age through a glorious end. No fair, viral. I want that job. You don't even have a boat. Please, take me with you. When the old men who had overheard their conversation began to crowd around them, the situation quickly got out of hand. The Crimson Vow had returned to the first fishing village they had visited after arriving on this new continent. Upon arrival, the old men from the welcome feast had gathered to say hi, providing the perfect opportunity for them to ask around to see if there were any foolhardy fishermen who happened to own a boat. This was the outcome. We're not heading off to our deaths. If you're looking to die, please do it on your own. As young girls with bright futures ahead of us, we have no interest in going down with you. Wah ha ha, fair point. Wah ha 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 ha, roared the whole crowd, and so the girls secured a boat and a helmsman. But at what cost? The fishing boat left the harbor and headed out to sea. It was a small boat with only a single triangular sail, but there was still plenty of room for the Crimson Vow to fight. All the spoils could go into Miles' storage, aka inventory, so there was no need to worry about running out of space. The vessel was designed to be propelled by a combination of oars and sail, but thanks to the Vow's wind magic, the sail would be playing a much larger role on this journey. Of course, it wasn't feasible to keep the wind magic going for the entire voyage, but it was handy to have for setting sail, docking, and other such key moments. And as for the rowing part, you girls are something else. Either of you wanna marry my grandson? Ha ha. Indeed. Loath to leave the grueling task of rowing the boat to a bunch of old men, Mile and Mavis had volunteered for the job, but they were a little too good at it. Mile's strength went without saying, and Mavis had a mechanical left arm and a body modified to withstand the recoil of its output. This was not to mention strength-enhancing magic that went by the name of spirit power. The men, who took pride in their well-toned bodies despite their old age, were shocked to find that the girls' combined powers far surpassed their own. There wouldn't be a point, Raina snapped. No matter how good a fisherman's wife is at rowing, she's stuck at home taking care of the house. Good point. For a moment there, the old men seemed almost convinced. But then... Wait, but what if they pass their strength on to our great-grandchildren? Great idea. I have no plans to get married in the foreseeable future. On board were the 4 members of the Crimson Vow and 4 retired fishermen, including the boat's owner, an old man named Viral. The old men had come along to, in their own words, balance the ratio of girls to escorts. Supposedly, there was a fisherman's version of Valhalla, where all the brave warriors who died at sea were summoned after death. The Crimson Vow had no desire to end up in an afterlife like that, but they refrained from saying so. It didn't matter, since they had no intention of dying, anyway. As the boat headed out to sea. Ready the line. Heave ho. Huh? We're going to use a long line to catch a sea serpent? Asked Mile, skeptical. Oh, nah, there's just no telling when we're gonna come under attack. Since we've made it all the way out to the open sea, we figure we might as well see what's lurking in these virgin fishing grounds. It's a fisherman's lifelong ambition, his dream, to fish out on the ocean where sea serpents abound. It couldn't hurt to make that dream come true at the very end. Oh. Cool. Mile was somewhat familiar with the concept of male dreams and ambitions. Mavis also bobbed her head in understanding. Of course, this long line wasn't like the ones found on Earth, which could have a main line anywhere from several kilometers long to over 100. It was a single rope a few dozen meters in length. In fact, it was an entirely different type of fishing gear from anything used in this world and known by a different term in the local language. Longline was really just the closest Japanese equivalent. We've got something. Uck. Be blast, either it's a big one or a bunch of medium-sized fishies took the bait all at once. It's too heavy to reel in. A little help here. Though only one longline had been used, several snoods were attached to the main line so that a large number of fish could be caught at once. Instead of letting the line sit for a while before retrieving it, the men had tried to pull it up immediately after casting. However, since they were quite literally out on the open ocean, where the fish population was still abundant, they already had a significant catch. With either an unexpectedly large fish or too many smaller ones on the line, the call went out for all hands on deck. A total of 6 people, the 4 old men, plus Mile and Mavis, struggled to pull up the main line with all their might. There was no handy electric winch to help them. They had no choice but to put some elbow grease into it, all the while watching out for the bait hooks that had no fish on them. Mile was strong, but she weighed very little. And since the deck of the boat was slippery and wet, it was hard for her feet to get perches. In short, it was difficult to exert her full strength. With her left arm to aid her, Mavis contributed more to the effort. Raina and Pauline were out of the game from the start. Staying out of the way would be more helpful than anything else. It took an awfully long time to reel in just a few dozen meters of line. At long last, piles of caught fish lay before an exhausted heap of old men. The small ones were somewhere around 30 centimeters, while the larger ones were over 2 meters long. Some had been even bigger than that, but those had been plucked directly from the sea into Mile's storage rather than hoisted onto the deck. The ones that were poisonous or otherwise inedible were released back into the sea, save for those whose skin and teeth could be sold as materials. These were no goblins. Even fish that weren't useful to humans could play a role in the balance of nature, so it would be wrong to kill them for no reason. Phew. Would you take a look at this? I see silver salmon, rainbow tuna, and marlins. Why, I haven't seen a rainbow tuna this big in decades. I'm glad I could make a catch like this at the very end. I can end my life as a fisherman with no regrets. All four men chorused. Hello? Sorry to break up the excitement, but our goal here isn't to catch regular fish. The boat charter fee, labor costs, and even the extra money to cover the hazards of the voyage had all been paid in advance, but the old men's chances of survival were so slim that they had given the money to their families. Their loved ones had wept, but no one had tried to hold them back. There was no stopping an old man who was on his way to perform his swan song. Surely that's what they were all thinking. It was just that kind of world, and a fishing village was just that kind of place. Our catches and bait have bled quite a bit. Our guests should be here any moment now. Everyone, please huddle in the corner and assume a defensive position. Raina, Pauline, prepare for battle. With these words, Mile cleared the deck, storing all the catches, lines, and other obstacles that she had left out to let the old men savor the moment. It was time for a player substitution. Raina and Pauline gave up their spot in the corner to the old men and proceeded to the center of the deck. Though the fishing boat was small, there was still ample space for four girls to fight. This was especially true since the enemies wouldn't be joining the fight on the deck, rather, the girls would strike the serpents down as they rose from the water. Mile and Mavis were also the only ones wielding swords, while Raina and Pauline barely had to swing or move their limbs at all. There was plenty of room to work with. Here it comes. Starboard, 2 o'clock, 30 meters away and 10 meters deep. A swarm of long and slender monsters is approaching at high speed. Naturally, Mile was using search magic. Otherwise, any attack from the water would qualify as an ambush. Letting the old men die or sinking the ship were not options. The girls had to vanquish the enemy forces before they could bore a hole in the bottom of the boat. If their opponents were ordinary serpents with sinuous bodies, that would be one thing, but if they were pointy like swordfish and strong enough to pierce wooden planks, things could get ugly fast. Thus, Mile's role in all this was to protect the old men and, if she detected enemies gunning for the keel of the ship with her search magic, to erect a barrier. Whatever strength she had left could then go toward killing the sea serpents. Raina could also put up a barrier, but she wasn't as skilled as Mile. She could only surround herself and those around her, though that would still suffice in this scenario. That said, if she put up a barrier, she couldn't attack from inside of it, and maintaining the shield would prevent her from using other types of magic, so it would exclude her from the strike force. As such, Raina had no plans to play defense unless the enemy forced them into a precarious position. If it's the same type of serpent we fought when we first came to this continent, we should be fine, said Mile. Sea serpents were rarely seen in their entirety, and the testimonies of the few survivors of attacks were unreliable, so the creatures had yet to be properly classified. As a result, almost all giant, slender sea-dwelling monsters were called sea serpents, and you had no way of knowing what you were up against until you encountered one. The smaller, serpentine ones they'd fought last time had been manageable, but if these turned out to be some wannabe Jormungandr or what would be called Chinese dragons on Earth, they might prove too much for even the Crimson Vow. The civilization of this world had once been quite advanced, so Mile wanted to believe that no monsters so extraordinary or mythical existed, but... we do have elder dragons. And since the sea serpents probably came here during the interdimensional invasion long ago, it wouldn't surprise me if some gigantic ones had been part of the initial group of monsters to make their way here. It could be that survivors or their descendants are still around, say, for example, some long-lived species of sea-dwelling monster, or a giant type that has continued to breed quietly in the unchanging sea. Even while she was thinking all this, Miles still made sure to stay attentive to the task at hand. The enemy is rocketing to the surface. They're poised to bypass the bottom of the ship and come at us from both sides. Prepare to intercept in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, now. With a splash, several slender figures shot up from either side of the ship and towered overhead. The monster's head snapped forward as they lunged at the people aboard the ship. Slash. Chop. Thud. One was cut down by a sword and a water cutter. Another was felled by an exploding fireball. As there was no danger of a fire spreading at sea, Rayna had used her specialty magic. She was confident enough in her aim that she would never screw up and burn the ship by accident. From the looks of it, these sea serpents were different from the ones that the Crimson Vow had fought before. Their bodies were a bit fatter and they had more sinister-looking heads, with glinting eyes and sharp rows of teeth. Slash. Chop. Thud. Slash. Chop. Thud. Slash. Chop. Thud. The Crimson Vow's three-man cell fired off the same string of attacks over and over again. Every now and then, the slash of Miles' sword was added to the mix, mostly whenever the sea serpents aimed their attacks at the old fisherman. As Miles was responsible for protecting the ship's keel with her barrier, it looked like she was taking it easy, but her mind was perpetually occupied with her search magic. Sea serpents piled up one after another on the deck, while others floated on the surface of the surrounding sea. Anything that looked liable to get in the way or sink to the ocean floor, Miles collected in her storage. On the deck, a number of sea serpents that hadn't quite died before being retrieved were writhing and thrashing about. Next thing the girls knew, the old men were joining the fight against the monsters, harpoons and files in hand. "It's too dangerous. You should stay back. This is for my brother. Take that. And that. You'll pay for taking my father from me. Gimme back my swoon. This is the harpoon Johann left behind. I'll take revenge for him here and now." Is this why the fisherman was so interested in such a dangerous fishing trip? It also explains why it was so easy to pick the members for the group, when so many people seemed eager to go. Anyone who had been in the fishing business for decades was bound to have seen monsters stray into inland waters, and then there were those fishermen who had gotten greedy and taken their boats too far offshore. In the same way, men who had been fishing their whole lives were also bound to have lost beloved family and friends. Even if these monsters weren't the same ones that had taken the lives of their loved ones, a sea serpent was a sea serpent. These men had clung to the hope that they would one day get their revenge. They didn't actually want to die at all. But killing a sea serpent in a final blaze of glory would be worth throwing away what little remained of their lives. These fishermen have waited a long time for this, haven't they? For the day when they could finally give their lives to strike back at the sea serpents. No one could find the words to respond to Mavis, but the chanting of attack spells and the sounds of swords slicing through the air filled the silence. And not a single one of the girls tried to stop the old men from putting themselves in harm's way. "It's over," said Miles. At her words, everyone on board finally stopped what they were doing. Both the deck and all the crew's clothes were sticky, slimy, and stained red with the sea serpent's blood and mucus. Clean. Miles cleaned everyone up with a spell, then stowed the dead monsters in her inventory. She also cleaned the deck while she was at it. After that came healing the old men. This part probably ought to have come before the cleaning, but it was possible Miles had good reason to prioritize hygiene, so her party members didn't feel the need to comment. Even as Miles cast her cleaning magic on them, the old men stood there motionless. Every single one of them was sobbing, letting tears flow freely down their cheeks. "Would you like to do a little more sea serpent hunting?" Miles asked. "And after that, we could use the long line to catch a bunch of rainbow tuna to bring back to the village." At first, no one reacted to her proposal. Gradually, however, the old men lifted their heads and wiped their eyes, the expressions on their faces warping from ones of sorrow to smiles. "Yeah. Bring it on," they shouted. A small fishing boat sailed toward a dock in a small fishing village, one so humble it could not truly be called a harbor. The boat's triangular sail billowed in a magical wind, and two flags flew from its mast. One was a flag indicating they had caught a big haul of fish, what is commonly known as a Terror-Batter flag. The other was a victory flag, signifying the defeat of a sworn enemy. It had been nearly 20 years since this flag had last flown from a village ship. Though it was still some distance away, the villagers spotted the boat returning from its raid on the open sea, along with the two flags fluttering above its mast. News spread, and the entire village gathered at the harbour to await the ship's arrival. On board, Mile had loaded the deck with sea serpents, rainbow tuna, silver salmon, marlins, and all other manner of fish. As many as she could fit without sinking the boat. And then 3 cheers for the raiding ship. Hip, hip, hooray. The villagers cheered, and the women began to head home before the boat had even docked, eager to begin the preparations for a village-wide feast. Coastal dwellers had good eyesight. From the terra batta and the piles of fish on the deck, they could see that the haul included not only their long-time nemesis the sea serpents but also a large number of gourmet fish. At the dock, the village chief belatedly called for a village-wide feast and announced that alcohol would be served from the village's stockpile. A group of just 4 old retired fishermen and 4 little girls from out of town had made an all-too-reckless venture into the open sea. What's more, they had gone looking for sea serpents, not fish. Clearly, these were 4 girls with a death wish, and 4 old men who weren't much different. No one could bear to stop them, but everyone had seen the group off expecting it to be a final farewell. Yet against all the odds, they had come back alive, and come back victorious, with an enormous haul. Tears of joy streamed down the faces of the village chief and his people. The next morning, exhausted from celebrating with the villagers all night long, the Crimson Vow got ready to leave for the port city they had made their home base. The villagers had strongly encouraged them to stay for a while, but the girls had the hunch that tonight was going to be yet another feast. Since the village now had mountains of perishable fish in supply, it only made sense to concentrate on consuming those rather than going out and fishing more. The Crimson Vow decided to get out before they overindulged in the festivities. Before leaving, Mile asked her 4 new comrades in arms, "Are you sure you don't want to keep one of the sea serpents as a trophy?" "Yeah, we're sure. We can't possibly dry such a large catch. Even if we wanted to keep one, it'd just rot," one of the old men replied, a touch wistfully. "Huh? Sure we can. It's easy with magic." "You can?" Mile proceeded to dry, or maybe mummify would be the right word, 1 sea serpent for each of the men, magically draining the water from the monsters' bodies. She took requests as to how the serpents should be posed before she began the drying process, and her ability to make them look cool without taking up too much space was a testament to her attention to detail. After that, the Crimson Vow departed the village, with the old men in tow. "Sorry to impose. It's tough to carry our share into town to sell, and it's easy to damage the goods. With such a big old haul, it's easier to sell it wholesale to the Merchants Guild than to each shop individually, even if it means the price takes a little hit. We'd sure appreciate it if you little ladies would deliver these goods straight to the Merchants Guild for us." "Ha ha, I imagine so. Sure, don't sweat it. We're headed back to town anyway, so we won't be going out of our way." Seeing as this dangerous mission could easily have resulted in the loss of their boat and their lives, the fishermen had received half of the successful haul as a completion bonus, in addition to the gold coins paid up front. If the men wanted to take their reward into town to be exchanged for coins, Mile didn't see an issue with carrying it in her storage for them. And so, all 4 old men, eager to brag about their exploits in town, decided to accompany the Crimson Vow. To be fair, it was dangerous to walk home carrying a lot of money, so the more people in the group, the better. The 4 men together should be safe. Not many would have the guts to attack a bunch of men who were quite buff for their old age, brandishing harpoons and casting menacing looks. Poke! Poke! Everyone was all smiles. There were no problems at poke! Poke! "What is it, Raina? Why do you keep poking me in the back?" Mile turned around, only to find a somewhat conflicted look on Raina's face. "Huh? What's wrong?" Pauline muttered, "Remind us again why we went hunting for sea serpents." "Huh? Well, you know." "Oh, right. We wanted to help Ali make a little profit as a severance of sorts, so we decided to bring her one sea serpent, because those rarely appear on the market. And as we speak, these old fishermen are on their way to sell their vast supply of fish through the Merchants Guild, said Raina. Along with a huge quantity of sea serpents. Our whole plan is ruined. The girls cried. The Crimson Vow had won the battle but lost the war. Side story. The perfect balance. I have a quick question for you, Mile. Oh, sure, what is it? A few days had passed since the Crimson Vow's arrival on the new continent. Considering it an information-gathering exercise/tutorial, as well as a chance to make a bit of a name for themselves in the region before heading to the capital, the girls had made the port city where they were currently staying their temporary home base. It was mostly coincidence that this had been their landing point on the continent, but a port city was also a good place to gather information and ingredients from all over the land, and a great place for seafood. This latter fact meant that all those who appreciated Mile's culinary skills and knowledge, and Mile herself most of all, had been quite eager to hang around. Meanwhile, Raina seemed to have something to ask Mile. Just how much are you planning to screw us here? Pardon. Failing to understand the meaning of Raina's question, Mile shot her a blank look, and then, Raina, how could you? Have some shame. Pauline's right, Raina. Mile is the youngest of us all, a minor, a somewhat respectable girl, and a noble woman yet to be engaged. Don't talk about her as if she was some kind of harlot. Huh? What are you guys talk? You've got it all wrong. I didn't mean it like that. Apparently, Pauline and Mavis had wildly misconstrued her meaning. Oh, so that's what you meant. Why didn't you just say so? That's some attitude to take when you jumped to the wrong conclusion, Raina snapped. Sorry. Pauline and Mavis backed down without a fight. So what you actually meant to ask Miley was... Right. I wanted to ask her how much trouble she's planning to get up to on this new continent. She has stupidly strong magic and a stupidly huge storage capacity, friendly relations with the Elder Dragons, and incredible spells she can cast by calling upon the spirits of the magic realm. If we do all the same things we did on the last continent, we'll end up right back where we started, with merchants, nobles, and royalty hanging all over us. Then we'll be forced to pack up and flee to the next continent, right? Mile had nothing to say for herself. Raina makes a good point, Mavis and Pauline agreed. So the first thing we need to do is lay down some clear ground rules as to what's acceptable and where we have to be more careful. All three girls had to admit that was a good idea. Okay. Although, frankly, I think that ship may have sailed. Ha ha. Mavis and Pauline couldn't help but laugh. Even Mile could concede that there might be some truth to that statement. Okay, it's been a while since we've done this, but it's time for a group meeting. The first question is whether or not to make Mile's storage magic public knowledge. It's inconvenient not to be able to use it freely, and we can't make much money if we can't bring back the spoils of our hunts. Besides, I think the secret's already out. The other members of the Crimson Vow all nodded. However, the existence of the spirits and Mile's role as the divine messenger need to stay top secret. We can't tell a soul. More nodding. Everything that happened on the old continent should be confidential as well. We did tell some of our stories to the Elder Dragons, but they wouldn't bother repeating those to humans, so that shouldn't be an issue. Oh, and of course, our connections with the Elder Dragons are also classified. Our recent dealings with them were a one-time thing where we just happened to run into them by pure chance. Got it? Again, all nodded. Well, that much has always been our default policy, so there was no real need to go over it again. The real problems start after that. First of all, we have to present ourselves as a young, up-and-coming party with upper C rank capabilities that's aiming for a promotion to B rank. It's not like that's a lie, really. If we do that, we can take on whatever missions we want without worrying about our clients or the other hunters looking down on us. But we won't mention our rank back on the old continent, our peerage, or our kill record, okay? There were more nods all around. Now, as far as money goes, we're not really hurting for coin, are we? Aside from Mile, we've all left most of our old fortunes back at our manors, but it's not that hard for us to make a living from scratch. To be fair, most of that is thanks to Mile's storage magic, but the fact remains. Indeed, it took more than just raw strength to make an easy living. While being strong did allow one to accept high-paying requests, those were inherently dangerous and difficult endeavors, with a high probability of serious injury or loss of life. There were no other jobs as relatively safe and lucrative as the Crimson Vow's mass orc deliveries. So we can stop being so stingy and... I disagree. Pauline interrupted Raina. Come on, Pauline, you're making more than enough money from your business now. You even said that while you're away, the head clerk you left in charge of your store and the deputy you left in charge of your territory are working hard to rapidly grow your own personal assets and those of your lands. There's no need to get so worked up about your earnings as a hunter when they're nothing compared to the income from your company. Wrong. If we go around talking like that, we won't look like ordinary hunters in our attitude toward work and money. That will invite suspicion from others, as well as give the impression that we're financially illiterate fools and easy marks to exploit and suck dry, which will be detrimental to our personal relationships and safety. That's actually a good point. Yeah. That's thinking I can get behind. Mavis and Mile both saw where Pauline was coming from on this one. Besides, a game we don't play seriously is no fun at all, Pauline continued her rant. Okay, true. Then as far as money goes, let's treat our finances like any ordinary C-rank hunters would. We'll go back to the basics and operate with the same sense of money we had 6 months after graduating from the Hunters Prep School. Still, everyone here knows that we're making money off Mile's storage magic, so let's not worry about being too cheap. Certainly, we can keep staying in decent inns and preserve our dignity as a party of young women. No objections. The other girls cheered. Pauline wasn't the same miser she had been right after graduating from the Hunters Prep School. In the intervening time, she had experienced 6 months of life as a countess and the noble's education that came with it. As such, she seemed more willing to pay a small price for safety and comfort, and she no longer insisted on staying in the cheapest back-alley inns. Of course, the Crimson Vow could use their magic to deal with fleas and mites, and human pests. Thugs, that is, were easy enough to subdue, but none of them wanted to be fighting for their lives where they were supposed to be sleeping. Also, Miles definitely banned from flying. Or, Mile whined, none too happy with Pauline's suggestion. No sending others flying, either. Raina added, some past trauma perhaps bubbling to the surface. Or, come on. Mile puffed out her cheeks, looking more and more displeased. Now. Let's say that rule only applies when other people are watching, okay? Mavis cut in to mediate. Mile looked more cheerful, almost certainly thinking something along the lines of, well, if I put up an invisibility field, that means I can do whatever I want. Also, since it would be crazy for 2 out of the 4 of us to know storage magic, Mavis is banned from using hers in public. What? Mavis yelped in surprise. Well, what did you expect? Pauline asked. It's a statistical impossibility, and I'm sure people would say, it's not fair to have 2 storage users in one party. Or it's a total waste of talent. And try to poach one of us. Worst case, the guild or local lord might even step in, Mile finished as Mavis's frown deepened. Of course, if that were to happen, we would pack up and move on to another town, territory, or kingdom, Raina added. With a Crimson Vow. We would never give up one of our own to serve someone else's interests or agenda. Our own agenda is the only one that matters. Who cares what some strangers think? You said it. The others chorused. Threats and coercion were only effective if the victim had a weak point, such as family, relatives, dear friends, or their own well-being. However, the Crimson Vow had no family, relatives, or friends in the whole continent, let alone in this town or kingdom, and not a single one of them was concerned for her own well-being. The party was invincible in both position and skill. Well, all that matters is that no one knows we have 2 storage magic users, so it's okay for Mavis to use hers when there's no one else around, like when we're in our room at the inn, or in the woods where we work, or on the road with no one in front of or behind us. Be careful, though, because if someone sees you, you'll have to keep them from talking. Keep them from talking? You heard me. Mavis and Raina exchanged serious looks. Like with a kiss? Obviously not. Both girls shot down Miles' attempt at a joke. Actually, if the person is a girl, Mavis could make it work, Pauline quipped. Shut up. Mavis howled. She was even-tempered compared to the others, but even she occasionally rose to their bait. To be clear, what Raina had been implying with keep them from talking was nothing so cruel as murder. She simply meant that Mavis would have to talk to them and persuade them not to say anything. Probably, while holding a giant fireball or magic explosive over the person's head. Well, the bottom line is, let's take things one step at a time, said Raina. Yeah. The other 3 cheered, pumping their arms. Mile beamed with delight, unaware that all 3 of her friends were thinking, I wonder how long our peaceful life on this continent will last. Didn't I say to make my abilities average in the next life? Volume 18. Previously. When Adele von Asham, the eldest daughter of Viscount Asham, was 10 years old, she was struck with a terrible headache and, just like that, remembered everything. She remembered how, in her previous life, she was an 18-year-old Japanese girl named Kurihara Misato who died while trying to save a young girl, and that she met God. Misato had exceptional abilities, and the expectations of those around her were high. As a result, she could never live her life the way she wanted. So when she met God, she made an impassioned plea. In my next life, please make my abilities average. Yet somehow, it all went awry. In her new life, she can talk to nanomachines, and although her magical powers are technically average, it is the average between a human's and an elder dragon's, 6,800 times that of a sorcerer. At the first academy she attended, she made friends and rescued a little boy as well as a princess. She registered at the Hunters Prep School under the name of Mile and made a grand debut with the Crimson Vow, the party she formed with her classmates. The 4 girls rescued countless people over the course of their journey. Finally, at the behest of the Slow Walker, a remnant of an ancient civilization, they banded together with humans, elves, dwarves, beastfolk, demons, and elder dragons alike to defeat powerful invaders from another dimension and protect their home. In the wake of their victory, the girls were heralded as the saviors of the world, until they rode an elder dragon to a distant continent, seeking an escape from their monotonous lives. Thus begins a brand new adventure for the Crimson Vow. Chapter 126. Storage Magic. What's our next move? After surveying the situation for themselves, the Crimson Vow had reached the conclusion that what made the local monsters so strong was their intelligence, not their physical abilities. However, there's no point in telling the guild master, said Mile. This is normal as far as the locals are concerned. No one will think it's a big deal for a jackalope to lead us into an ambush, or for an orc and an ogre to form a 2-man cell. Right. That's business as usual around here, Mavis agreed. They wouldn't find anything strange about it. Raina and Pauline were silent. But why are the local monsters so smart? Pauline eventually wondered aloud. What could be the reason? And how long has that been the case? No one had an answer for her. It's not a stretch to assume that the monsters that came from another dimension long ago grew soft and weak in our peaceful world, Mile mumbled. After all, there was a marked difference in strength between the monsters from the old continent and those from the invasion, but there wasn't much of a difference in intelligence. If anything, the monsters that have spent all this time in conflict with the humans of our world seemed a bit smarter. Considering all that, I doubt the monsters on this new continent have retained superior intelligence as one of their old traits. That leaves only one possible answer. They got smarter after coming here? Raina was as quick on the uptake as ever. And it wasn't all that long ago when things changed. What? How do you know that? Asked Pauline. If the monsters had always been this smart, the humans on this continent would have gone extinct a long time ago, Mavis replied. Or, at best, they would have been displaced to areas where monsters are scarce. Oh, I see. Though any single monster's intelligence was a far cry from any individual humans, had the continent been populated by a host of advanced creatures, humanity would have been overrun and overthrown ages ago. Monsters boasted big, tough bodies, formidable strength, superior stamina, and high fertility rates. Some among them could even use magic. The only reason humanoids had the upper hand on the old continent was because the creatures were stupid and uncoordinated. If they had ever acquired even the slightest bit of intellect, things would have gone very differently, and it's not something that happened all at once, either, Mal added. Exactly, Mavis agreed. The girls were right. Had the change come on suddenly, it obviously would have caused a stir, one that the guild master would never have neglected to mention. To go unnoticed, the change in the monsters must have taken place over decades or centuries. Even now, the monsters could be getting smarter by the second. The quartet lapsed into silence as this possibility occurred to them. Still, there's no reason to worry. Mal piped up after a long pause. The locals have managed this long, and I doubt the situation will dramatically worsen in the next few years, or even decades. Besides, while the monsters are evolving and getting smarter, so are we humans. With stronger and more advanced weapons and armor, fortified bulwarks, and a growing population, humanity will be ready to show those monsters who's boss.